Hi. Today is the 6th of November 2020, or more precisely, 2020 AD. AD stands for Anno Domini Nostri Jesu Christi, which means, in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ. Depending on different beliefs, Jesus is identified as God, the Son of God, the Messenger of God, or at least a prominent historical figure with some relation to God. But what is common to those definitions, is that it has something to do with God, the omnipotent being that created everything. It is somehow funny to note that by just reading the date on our phones, we are referring to God. The concept of God has a tremendous influence on our civilization. Billions of people claim to believe in God, and to live according to His teachings. They can be educated or not, famous or not, rich or poor. Even presidents and CEOs may talk about God. But, in 2020, is the question of God still relevant? I mean, we have made a lot of progress since the last religion, more than 1,400 years ago. Now, we have the iPhone. We have the world knowledge right at our fingertips. We went to the moon. We can rain the clouds. We can communicate in real time with any person we want in the opposite side of the planet. Do we really need God to show us the path? We have Google Maps. But, before trying to answer the question about God's existence, we can ask ourselves a more basic one: should we bother ourselves with the question of God? Well, to answer this first question, I will use a process of thinking called thought experiment. The first time I came across this concept, I was watching a video about relativity, and a French scientist, whose name is Etienne Klein, was explaining how Einstein used this way of thinking to come up with his theory about relativity. I called this thought experiment the train of life. Let's imagine you woke up on a train, dazed and confused, with a terrible headache. You start looking at people around you. You don't recognize anyone. You take a look through the window, and you just see a natural landscape scrolling. You don't remember why and how you took this train, but you still remember everything about yourself. The first question you will try to answer is, what am I doing here? So you start asking people, what day is it? Where are we? Where this train is going? What's the next station? And then, at your big surprise, you are given very different answers. A group of people told you that everyone in this train came up like you, and just got used to this situation. Another group told you that the train will stop when it will run out of energy. Other people said that it has always been like this, and the train will never stop. Another group told you that a very long time ago, a person came from the first car, and told everyone that there are only 2 stations and the train will stop one day. In a certain way, we are in this very same situation. We were born on this gigantic spaceship called Earth, traveling through universe, heading to an unknown destination. We are told different stories from different people about what we are doing here. But, unlike the guy on the train, we don't seem very concerned about this question. So why is that? It's because we didn't face this situation in a sudden way. We were born, then become kids, primarily interested in playing, then we've grown up and became teenagers, looking to have good time with friends and maybe study few things by the way, and then we became adults, we got a job and had to take responsibilities and face life problems. But, is the question about God still relevant? As the guy in the train, we naturally want to answer those kind of questions. But the fact is we are sucked into the whirlwind of modern life, and we don't stop and take time to think about it. We are also fooled by the progressive way we came to realize our place in the universe. If we had come to life in this planet as adults, or with the same cognitive abilities, we would have been very concerned with these kind of questions. Now that we have found a good motivation, let's try to find out what are we doing in this planet. Humans, as far as I know, have come with 2 main theories about the meaning of life. One is that life has no particular purpose. We came to existence because of an incredible coincidence, and we just live and die, trying to get the best possible life. The second is that we were created by God, and we were sent to this world as a test, to see if we will follow the path of good, or the path of evil. There is a bunch of other theories in between, like that we were created by aliens through genetic modifications and things like that, but we will stick to the main two theories. Like every child, when I asked questions about life, the answers I got corresponded to my parents' beliefs. The statement, "God created the first man," seemed to be a satisfying answer to the recursive question children like to ask, who created mom? And who created her mom? But, unlike some believers, for whom I have a lot of respect, like Mr. Fox Mulder, I didn't want to believe. I wanted to make my own mind about this question. Generally, when the existence of God is mentioned, people tend to ask for material evidence. It's a very legitimate question. Otherwise, why believe in any particular theory? Instead of waiting for the extraordinary discovery that will make people agree about the existence of God, let's reverse the problem. Let's imagine what kind of discoveries could be considered as a material evidence of the existence of God. The problem is, every time I try to do this exercise, I only come up with ideas that sound stupid. Will humans one day be able to see God through a very sophisticated telescope? Do we want a sample of matter that constitute God? Do we want to detect a strange energy or something with a tremendous power? In fact, we did. Black holes, for example, are stellar objects the size of a pinhead, but with a gravitational force that is so powerful they can rip apart stars, and heavily distort space-time. Even light cannot escape from black holes. But, even with all this phenomenal power, I've never heard about someone claiming that black holes are proof of the existence of God. In fact, the contrary seems to happen. Stephen Hawking, one of the most brilliant minds of this century, said that, "We don't need God to explain the universe." What's more to say then? We seem to be stuck in this way. But let's try to find some inspiration in religions. In Islam, for example, God is like nothing that we can imagine. So maybe we cannot have a direct proof related to his being. But can we have evidence based on his action on the universe? In the Quran, it is stated, "He who shapes you in the womb as he pleases." Well, let's check that. We have now the technology to see the evolution of human embryo in the womb. Let's see what it looks like. Well, things seems to evolve without any external intervention. Cells are dividing and specializing to become organs. We don't see any kind of light shaping the human embryo. So, is there nothing more to see? Or aren't we looking the right way? Let's start from the beginning. What is the universe? Everyone will agree that the universe is matter and energy evolving through space and time. Said that way, this statement hides a very important aspect of the universe. It's hidden in the word, evolving. And it is about the rules that governs how matter and energy evolve through space and time. Rules don't have a material aspect, it's written nowhere, and it can only be inferred. But, what we are commonly calling the laws of physics, are a very important constituent of the universe. Usually, we try to figure out these rules through experimentation. But it is not always possible to do it that way. In fact, as we saw earlier, Einstein has come up with the theory of relativity through thought experiment. The theory was confirmed later through real experimentations, but the amazing fact is that, according to Etienne Klein, there was no experimental way that could lead to the discovery of relativity. It has required to completely rethink the laws of physics, and come up with a new model. So let's sum up a little bit. The laws of physics are a very important constituent of the universe. Some laws could only be discovered using the power of mind. Given these two facts, if God created the universe, and if some constituent of the universe could only be discovered using only rational thinking, is it still reasonable to try to prove the existence of God through material evidence? Through measuring equipment? Through our limited senses? Through less powerful tools than the mind? Of course not. This means that the only way for humanity to prove the existence of God is through rational thinking. Let's try then. Few years ago, I watched a video from a French science YouTube channel. The video was about something called the game of life. The idea is to try to create a digital universe, and try to create a certain form of life based on very simple rules. One of these programs is called Langton's Ant and was created in 1984. The idea is pretty simple. We have a universe in the form of a grid, with squares that can be either black or white. A square-sized ant can move in this universe. Depending on the color of the square the ant is sitting on, it will choose a direction and move by one square. On a white square, the ant turns 90 degrees right and move, and on a black one, the ant turns 90 degrees left and move. Each time the ant leaves a square, it flips its color. As we can see, the pattern created evolves through time. In the first few hundred steps, a simple pattern appears. Then it starts to be chaotic and irregular. After nearly 10,000 steps, the ant enters an irregular linear pattern. What is really amazing is that, for all possible combinations tested, using all possible initial colors of the grid, and all possible starting positions, the ant will always end up following this same exact pattern. By the way, it's funny to imagine an ant telling the other, "You think you are free and can go anywhere, but one day you will have to follow the path." Let's take a more complex example. It is called Kanawu's Game of Life. We have the same grid as universe, and each square can contain a cell, which is represented by the black color. Every square is surrounded by 8 other squares. If an empty square is surrounded by 3 cells, a new cell is created in that cell. If a square contains a cell, it will remain alive if surrounded by 2 or 3 cells, and die if surrounded by less than 2 cells, or more than 3 cells. The goal is to create initial structures that will keep life evolving in the universe. As we saw in this last video, we can create some sort of life form that evolves and perpetuates through time, and even structures that can create other moving structures. Using the term life is not that disproportionate, as certain characteristics are specifically attributed to life, the capacity to move and the capacity to duplicate itself. The magic resides in the fact that those structures evolves and organizes without external intervention. It seems then that the laws of the universe, and the initial configuration are much more important than matter. In fact, given all possible rules, the ones that can create a certain form of life, or a kind of non-chaotic evolution are very few. It is also very hard to predict the evolution of the universe given the laws, because as we saw, even simple rules can create complex patterns. And finally, it seems almost impossible to decide for a certain evolution, and then find the rules that can lead to it. Back to our world. In the same way, it seems that the sets of rules that governs the universe are so unique, compared to all possible rules, that the probability you pick the right rules by chance to create this particular universe, and make it evolve like we know, is zero. For example, if we take the law of gravitation, there is a constant called the gravitational constant. If the value of this constant changes only by an amount equivalent to an inch, compared to the size of the universe, the whole universe ceases to exist. Back to our question now. When Stephen Hawking said, "We don't need God to explain the universe," he was probably right. He just forgot to add, given the rules. From the moment everything is in place, and the rules are finely tuned, things can evolve by themselves. The human embryo doesn't need an external intervention to evolve, because he is already designed for this. Everything is already written in his DNA. It is maybe the same thing for the whole universe. Its evolution may be already written in the rules of physics, and we may never discover something more than that. Not because it is hidden somewhere, but because it is hidden everywhere. If an ant in the universe of Langton start observing other ants, she can guess what the rules are, and start predicting future. She can tell the other ants, "We don't need God to explain the universe, but this God exists, his name is Langton, he lives outside the ant's universe, and he is nothing like what the ant can imagine."